Let's look in this video on operating systems. What are operating systems? So, an operating system is software that drives the hardware of a computer system. And the main function of an operating system is to be the communication layer between user applications on the one hand and the specific hardware of a computer on the other hand. So we know that computers, or PCs, personal computers, are based on an open architecture. And actually we can install many different components like high-level applications and add devices to a computer in any way we want. So when you as a user use some of these applications, you obviously do not drive the hardware directly. You communicate with the operating system, and the operating system communicates for you and the application to drive the hardware. So actually in this way we can see as an operating system as a broker that acts amongst the user and the applications and the devices that he or she wants to use. So an operating system is basically software that runs permanently on a computer from the moment we start it up. So we turn our computer and we start up the operating system. So what this actually means is that we load the operation system, which is stored on hard disk in the computer, we store it into the RAM memory of our computer. So once it's there in the memory, the CPU, that is the component that is in charge of running instructions, it runs the instructions that are stored in the memory that are related to the operating system and the things that we want to do. So from that moment on, the operating system takes control of the hardware of the computer, and we can start using the system through the user interface that the operating system presents to us. So, for example, if you start up a Windows system, you know that you have a menu button from which you can choose the desired element or application that you want to use. So there's basically three popular operating systems, and on this slide we see 4 pictures of people that actually initiated them. So here we see 2 pictures of Richard Stallman and Linus Torvalds, and they were actually the initiators of what is nowadays known as the Linux operating system. Here we see Bill Gates, who obviously is the founder of Microsoft Windows. And here we see Steve Jobs, who is the one that is responsible of Apple and the Mac OS operating system. So, as we have said, an operating system is part of the system software. It performs a variety of technical operations, and in this way it acts as an agent between the user of an application and its hardware. So let's see why we need them. What are features of operating systems? So first of all, an operating system we need for simplicity. It simplifies the access to files and hardware, and it actually makes using and making applications simpler. So imagine we don't have an operating system. So then we would have to program how we connect to the hardware directly. So we have to say, we have to connect the hardware together to get the desired functionality. This is the way it was done in the 40s and in the 50s. And that means it would have limited output, and if we wanted to define new operations, this was rather difficult. So now the operating system takes care of this for us and makes everything simpler. We don't have to know how the hardware works in order to use a personal computer. The second feature of operating systems is that they maximize the performance of the components. So modern operating systems allow for multitasking. So what this means is that they combine different tasks of different applications such that efficiency is improved. Basically this consists, and we will see this later in a little bit more detail, basically it consists of arbitrary concurrent access to shared resources of a computer. In this way we can maximize performance. So like with any computer software, operating systems can be disseminated in different ways. We can distinguish between proprietary software and open source operating software. So if the software has properties, then it's copyright, and if it's open source, it is copyleft. You can see this on the slide. We have copyright and copyleft. If we have proprietary licenses, the software is protected and the user only gets some right of it. With open source software, users have broader rights over the software and can even be entitled to modify and adapt the source code of the operating system to their needs. So an important concept in operating systems is also a thing called upgrading. So upgrading refers to the changes that companies introduce in the software to correct bugs or improve performance, add some functionality that is needed, or adapt new hardware or software, for example. So upgrading is something that's constantly being done by software developers, and what they do is they periodically publish new versions of their applications that incorporate these needed changes. So usually versions with minor changes are identified with decimal numbers in the version number, so you don't really notice this so much as a user. But if versions incorporate big changes, then actually also the name is changed. And you can see this, for example, in the names from Windows that went from Windows XP to Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 10. And in Mac we have, for example, Mac Leopard, Mountain or Lion. So these are big changes and big upgrades. So, to conclude this video, an operating system is an intermediary between users, applications and hardware. It eases the use of a computer and the creation of application software. And the most used operating systems that we nowadays know for desktops are Windows, Linux and OS X for Macintosh.